Anyway, somebody earlier, I don't think they're still here, but they were trying to say that, like, oh, I don't know if the Nazis, like, what is the relevance of the neo-Nazis in Ukraine? I have like four? Yeah, well, actually more. There's a little more. Articles from, sources that a lot of people tend to enjoy, explaining the context here. And it's from, like, the first one is from 2019. Like, it's not like they want to really amplify this message at this point, right? However, there's this article from The Guardian, which is like, libs love this source, about ultranationalism in Ukraine. The growing presence of far-right groups in Ukraine leaves the West in a quandary. The ultranationalists have played a key role in fighting Russia-backed separatist rebels, the republics that Russia recently recognized, and are now challenging government corruption. But they're pushing for changes that go against democratic ideals. Of course, this is like liberal framing of the issue, right? Like, this is how they talk about it everywhere. But you can see their priorities, right? Because they would also say that about us, communists. They would also say that about us. But really, that's not the significance of the threat of actual fascists, right? The country's ultranationalist groups came to the fore in 2014 when they kickstarted massive street protests that led to the ousting of the Russia-friendly president Viktor Yanukovych. The fascist coup that the U.S. helped to happen in 2014, which is where this whole mess began. That's also when the Donbass conflicts began, which started this entire thing. Russia responded by annexing Ukraine's Crimean Peninsula and backing separatists in the east, moves that drew sanctions from the west, which is basically what happened again this year. Thousands of Ukrainian nationalists then headed for the east, forming volunteer battalions that served as a vanguard for the Ukrainian forces in the rebel regions. So you can see them training. They have children here that they're like, looks like child soldiers almost. Children with rifles at a summer camp. No, they're not child soldiers. They're a summer camp organized by the nationalist Svoboda Party. The influence of nationalist groups has steadily grown, driven by public dismay over the country's economic woes. Ukraine is the poorest country in Europe, and rampant corruption. Mostly teenage members of the ultra-right groups have followed the guidance of war veterans practicing martial arts and learning how to handle weapons. So they are basically child soldiers. That's what the quote-unquote summer camps are for. They're like little training grounds. The number of ultranationalists is estimated at about 10,000, and they can quickly take thousands to the streets and resort to violence. So you have them fighting here. The youth wing fight. They have little girls training to be little neo-Nazi soldiers here. They are marching towards a Russian Orthodox church in Kiev. Notice how they always use the I before this whole thing, and then all the mainstream outlets switch it to a Y. It's spelled with an I, by the way. They have undergone organizational, military, and ideological training, said Andrei Yermolayev, the head of the new Ukraine independent think tank. They are strongly motivated and active. Torch-bearing ultra-right activists regularly march to the beat of drums across Ukrainian capitals downtown, chanting, "Death to traitors of Ukraine." During one scuffle at the memorial to a Red Army general killed in the Second World War, an elderly woman approached a group of radical nationalists shouting, "Hang the Russians," and defied them, saying, "I'm Russian, hang me." One of the right-wingers, Kirill Nadin, pushed her back and was briefly detained for resisting police. So you have these torchbearer people, right? Just like in Charlottesville here, like, And it's so fucking funny how all the liberals like to frame it as like, oh, this rise of ultranationalism and quote-unquote totalitarianism around the world. And they list people who it's it makes sense to list them, like the fucking guy in Hungary, Orban, who's basically a neo-Nazi. The dude in, I think it's the Philippines. I forget his name. And like Bolsonaro in Brazil and all these. But they also talk about Maduro, and they talk about Putin, and they talk about Xi, and they talk about like, some of them even talk about AMLO from Mexico, who's just like a populist, And it's really like the way they frame it. Yeah, Duterte, that guy, yeah. The way they frame it, you can tell it's like the psychosis or the neurosis of a liberalism that is dying on the world stage. So they're like, oh, we have enemies everywhere. Like, oh my God. But yeah, there is some kind of commonality as this whole thing kind of breaks down, where you see people diverging in both the far right and far left directions. Like here in Ukraine, all these other places. Now, but the difference is, in a covert sense, the right-wingers actually serve the establishment, especially in places like Ukraine. That's the significance here. They're literally part of the Ukrainian military. And they have active participation in Ukrainian politics. Here's them vandalizing a portrait of a Ukrainian Marxist. In a series of violent actions that underline their strength, right-wing radicals in recent years have assaulted gatherings by LGBT and women's rights activists, attacked Roma encampments around the country, derailed a lecture on the history of the Holocaust, and brawled with pro-Russia veterans. The ultra-right groups also have a strict military-style structure, and many of their members have battlefield experience from years of fighting in the East. Attacking Donbass. Yermolayev said in the past, the government turned a blind eye to the rise of nationalist groups, using them as a scare tactic, but now the ultra-right has turned on the authorities. The well-organized and aggressive nationalism in Ukraine is a child of the government. It's a child of the government. I'll say that again. It has lost control over radical nationalists. Poroshenko has lost that game. Former soldier and... Who's Poroshenko? Who's that? Oh, he was the guy who lost to Zelensky. I see. International human rights groups have strongly criticized the Ukrainian government for failing to track down and punish those responsible for the acts of violence and intimidation. The government has promised to rein in the ultranationalists but has taken no action. The Interior Minister, Arsen Avakov, said the right-wing organizations will be stopped. They all know it very well, and there will be no amnesty for them. Obviously, that did not come to pass. Miroslav Merez, an expert on right-wing extremist groups at Brno University, said Ukraine's far right has been successful in reaching out to ultranationalist forces in Europe. They have good relations to some neo-Nazi groupings in Central and Eastern Europe, Merez said. He added that early in the conflict in eastern Ukraine, some members of Europe's neo-Nazi groups trained and fought with the Azov Battalion, a Ukrainian ultra-right paramilitary group that advocated white supremacist views. Here they are fighting pro-Russians at a Soviet-era monument to General Nikolai Vatutin. Ukrainian far-right also appears to have ties in other countries. The Australian Brenton Tarrant, accused of slaughtering 50 people at 2 mosques in the city of Christchurch, mentioned a visit to Ukraine in his manifesto, and some reports alleged he has contacts with the ultra-right. So you have some dumbass liberal idiot, unless you're being ironic in my chat, going Slava Zucchini. So the Christchurch shooter in New Zealand was literally friends with these guys. This is the company you're keeping, folks. Ukrainian supporters. Yermolayev, the political analyst, noted that a violent image projected by Ukrainian nationalists could serve as an argument for those in the European Union who are reluctant about putting Ukraine on a membership track anytime soon. How can you integrate a country plagued not only by corruption but also nationalism, he said. So Ukraine is basically Europe's rejected fucking redheaded stepchild, basically. And they just have this, like, fascist psychosis fit against Russia. And then Russia decided, you know what? If you're going to keep bullying us, we're the bigger bully. We're going to bully you back. We're going to defend ourselves. We're going to recognize the separatist republics. And we're going to kick your asses. And that's really the geopolitical context of what happened here. Yeah, but the thing about the Wagner Group is they're not a part of the Russian military. And the neo-Nazis in Ukraine are a part of the Ukrainian military. They're government affiliated. The neo-Nazis in Russia have nothing to do with the government at all. That's the difference. What do you mean they only work for pro-Russian forces? How do you not see the relevance in the distinction? They work for because they're in Russia, because they're Russian Nazis. That's why. Because they are Russians, you fucking moron. They're not in the government. Russia doesn't have a Nazi problem in its government like Ukraine does. That's the point. Anyway. Okay, you can say that they quote-unquote pay Nazis. The Ukrainian government are Nazis. That's the difference. What does it matter? How is that relevant whatsoever? What am I supposed to do? Act like I'm above the reality of civilizational otherness, of the fact that other fucking civilizations in the world have different views about this kind of thing? Do you not understand that we live in a real world here? Sorry, I'm not going to privilege my fucking personal identity over geopolitical realities. Like a fucking idiot. Yeah, it's not about me, is it? Because I don't live there. It's not about me, is it? Are you listening? You are legitimately a stupid fuck. Do you know that? Like, you are actually a stupid fuck. Hopefully you understand that. Yeah, keep talking to yourself in chat, you little fucking pussy. Moving on. Okay, so this one is more recent. It's from 7 months ago. Too far yet unstoppable. The story of ultranationalism in Ukraine. In the last 7 years, Ukraine's image as a sovereign nation has changed drastically. It has risen from its old status as an autocratic Russian puppet state, so-called, to a pro-EU, so-called democratic country. However, see, the framing here is way more liberal. However, one must admit that at the same time, democratization comes with a cost. So paradoxically, they're claiming that it was democratization that caused the rise of the far right, and not the fact that it was literally a fascist coup imposed and aided and abetted by so-called democratic countries like America that caused it. So in a strange sort of paradoxical way, these kind of liberal sources will actually admit the truth. Since the Euromaidan protest toppled the pro-Russian Viktor Yanukovych government in 2013-2014, many ultranationalist organizations founded or gained notoriety in Ukrainian politics. Just like the Svoboda Party, which is known for its radical stance in the parliament of Ukraine. Even before the Euromaidan incident, the right sector is also known for fighting the riot police and amassing assault weapons in the protest. Although the far-right coalition under the Svoboda Party only achieved 2.5% of the votes in the 2019 Ukraine parliamentary election, the ultranationalists already have a place in the politics of Ukraine, especially when it comes to street politics and violence. Ultranationalist organizations and militias often attack human rights activists, LGBTQ+, or even Jews and Romani people in the street. The tragedy has occurred repeatedly that such violence is deemed a usual routine in Ukrainian cities, damaging the image of Ukraine in the international community. Worse, the police act passively towards the ultranationalist violence and usually prefer to stop the counter-protests against the ultranationalists. So keep on talking in chat about how, oh, they wouldn't kill you there, when they literally do, and their government condones it. You fucking idiot. Like, you fucking idiot. All these ultranationalist surges raise several interesting questions. Why did it all happen? Where did it all start? More importantly, why can't the police stop it, or worse, do they even want to put a stop to it? There are many reasons why the ultranationalist movement skyrocketed in Ukraine. It ranges from political concerns to economic problems that have plagued the nation since its independence in 1991. However, one reason has become blindingly apparent. Ukraine is enjoying its identity renaissance. A renaissance of pan-European supremacy. Historically, the Ukrainians are a group of people that has suffered many forms of subjugation and attempts to eliminate their culture. For more than 700 years, Ukraine was ruled by foreign powers and cultures such as Mongols, Poland, Lithuania, Austria-Hungary, and Russia. The Russian Empire and the Russian-dominated Soviet Union were notoriously known for their attempt to restrict or even eliminate the Ukrainian cultures and reinforce a Russification policy. The revival of Ukrainian identity in post-1991 independent Ukraine was also often stalled by pro-Russian sentiment in the southern and eastern Ukraine, as well as Russia's adamant pressure on the country. So you have people who are Ukrainians who kind of just want to be Russian. Like, they don't even like it. Like, consequently, the Ukrainians have not been able to fully express their identity as Ukrainian for more than 7 countries or centuries, even after independence. Because it's kind of a fake country at the end of the day. The situation radically changed when the people, fueled by anger over the cancellation of the Ukraine-EU agreement by pro-Russian Viktor Yanukovych's presidency, rebelled toward the government in the Euromaidan protests. During the said event, the Ukrainians finally discovered a way to express themselves as Ukrainian through rebelling against the government supported by a foreign power. The nationalist sentiment increased much further when Russia controversially annexed the Crimean Peninsula and supported the pro-Russian Donetsk and Lugansk people who were going against the central government of Ukraine. In the end, Ukrainians finally gained their identity again as Ukrainian who tried to protect their sovereignty against foreign threats. Chill with the fucking all countries are fate. That's not true. Do I think this will increase or decrease? It's probably increasing and decreasing in other ways. Like, it all depends on... The neo-Nazis and ultranationalists that do exist are probably more emboldened than ever right now. Because they have the ability to express this kind of, like, identity thing that's being discussed in this article. The revival of Ukrainian identity came with a rising neo-Nazi style of ultranationalism. Or it would probably be more accurate to say it came as a rising neo-Nazi style of ultranationalism. What do you mean? There's a reason why I'm not an anarchist anymore. It's because it's stupid. To represent nationalist sentiment and Ukrainian identity, many organizations chose to make World War II-era fascist and Nazi collaborator organizations, such as OUNB. These movements also bestowed questionable figures as their role model for Ukrainian nationalism, such as, I'm pretty sure this is supposed to say, what a fucking crazy typo, such as Stepan Bandera, yeah. The ultranationalist organizations also use Nazi symbolism to represent their identity, such as the Wolfsangel logo that is now claimed as the manifestation of Ukraine's quote-unquote national idea. All of the Nazi resemblances create massive consequences on Ukrainian ultranationalist way of thinking. They believe that they are destined to cleanse the Ukrainian people from many groups they perceived as impure or threat to national security, sovereignty by any means, including violence. So that's who people like Corvo Bianco over here are defending. The result of the neo-Nazi attitude is staggering. In 2018, an ultranationalist group attacked a Romani camp in western Ukraine, leaving 1 dead by stabbing and 4 injured. Another ultranationalist group also attacked many participants in the routine International Women's Day on March 8th in the same year. Back in 2017, Israel also reported that anti-Semitism incidents in Ukraine had doubled, surpassing the tally for all anti-Semitic incidents reported throughout Eastern Europe and former Soviet Union territories. There is a significant element of anti-Semitism in Ukraine that is more than anywhere to its east, as reported by Israel itself. Now, I don't know their methodology for measuring that, but I don't understand how you could equivocate some kind of Nazism as just being everywhere, when clearly it's more significant in Ukraine than in Russia or anywhere else in the east of Ukraine. I don't believe you for a second that you say there have been 0. That's literally false. Alex, why do you think in such idealistic general terms? It's not about deciding in some kind of mental vacuum whether or not anti-Semitic countries should be invaded or not. It's about the material reality of the situation at hand. Like, how many times do I have to explain this? The world doesn't work in this fucking abstract principle way. It's based on nothing. It's a bunch of hot air. Like, that's an irrelevant question. It's literally not relevant to ask. So they're saying the nationalist sentiment has gone too far. It has changed from expressing one's identity revival into a tool for racist and xenophobic remarks. Cool it with the anti-Semitic remarks. It has also tarnished Ukraine's face in the international community, credited their blatant, violent engagement with human rights activists. So Europe doesn't want Ukraine, basically. The EU doesn't want it because it has this fucking fascism problem. That's literally the case. Like, they're like, sorry, guys, you're too crazy for us. Like, even us, we can't. Sorry, like, you're on your own. They're not going to become a client state of China. They're going to become close allies, like, very, very close allies with China. That's what I'm seeing. They're not even aspiring for empire either. Are you fucking insane? The Azov Battalion has existed for like 8 years or more. What are you talking about? It was just invented. This guy is literally full of lies and bullshit. Like, this is just useless that you're sending all this shit. 2014 was the coup, not the invasion. What are you talking about? What invasion? Are you talking about Crimea? You're talking about Crimea. Well, regardless, the Azov battalion is literally the aggressor in eastern Ukraine. I don't understand how you could even dispute that at all, when most of eastern Ukraine doesn't even want to be fucking part of Ukraine in the first place. All these fucking pointless little objections from the fucking penis gallery in my chat. So they're calling it defense here, but it's clearly not. But there's very much a I don't understand what you're talking about at all. Like, you should honestly just stop talking. I don't understand how you could make some kind of claim that there isn't a grand significance of this ultranationalist neo-Nazi movement in Ukraine when they're literally, like, it's literally admitted in this article that their actions create an image that their movement is one of the guarantors of Ukrainian sovereignty, thus making them a war hero in the eyes of many Ukrainians. Like, that's how they see it themselves. Okay, can you just shut the fuck up, please? Like, seriously. Get out of my chat. Fucking moron. Oh my god. Sometimes you just can't entertain it any longer. Bringing up all of this irrelevant nonsense. So yeah, let's talk about this. Many streets and statues have been renamed and erected to commemorate the ultranationalist and Nazi collaborator figure Stepan Bandera. All of the government's tacit support seems to create a sense of legitimacy for the ultranationalist groups to justify their radical and extremist actions. In the end, nationalism in Ukraine was quite a positive phenomenon at the beginning of Euromaidan, this source claims. However, Ukrainian nationalist groups chose the Nazi idea and heritage as their role model and symbol of nationalism. Yeah. The pro-ultranationalist power structure in post-Euromaidan Ukraine makes it seem unstoppable. So liberal sources are admitting that there is a pro-ultranationalist power structure. So when fucking Arnold Schwarzenegger gets on his little iPhone vlog and tries to tell you that there's no Nazi problem in Ukraine, he's literally bullshitting you. It is not because they cannot stop it, they chose not to stop it. So you have all these groups living in this sort of threat of violence towards them. Since, this was written 7 months ago before the special military operation began. And they're talking about 2014, so yeah. So they venerate this fucking dude, Stepan Bandera, who's a Ukrainian Nazi collaborator. There are a few figures in Ukrainian history as controversial. Few are able to influence so profoundly modern politics more than 6 decades after their death. He died in 1959 after being poisoned by Soviet agents. Based? He's seen as a national hero who fought for Ukrainian independence during the 30s and 40s. To others, he's a war criminal whose nationalist forces carried out atrocities against Jews and Poles during World War II. Now, the authorities in Lviv, in western Ukraine, have reignited the debate over the wartime militia leader by requesting the government to rename Arena Lviv in honor of Bandera and forcing Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky to pick a side during a bitter election battle. They're pressuring Zelensky and Shmyhal, the prime minister, to decide if they are nationalists or not. Zelensky, who won the 2019 election by a landslide with over 70% of the vote, is currently polling at just 19. Really? This was a year ago. Damn. Now, this city's authorities are dominated by the Svoboda party that we just heard about, who are Nazis. Because his support was lower, he moved towards the right wing. This is how they're measuring their patriotism, whether or not they venerate a fucking Nazi collaborator. It is not the first time by any means that a war over Bandera's legacy has been waged in the highest echelons of Ukrainian politics. In 2010, he was named the hero of Ukraine by President Viktor Yushchenko, sparking anger in Europe, Poland, and Israel. So this guy is literally a national hero. A Nazi collaborator is a national hero of the country. It should, at least raise your eyebrows a little bit. He was stripped of the title in 2011 under Yushchenko's replacement, President Viktor Yanukovych, the pro-Russian guy. But he was ousted in 2014, renamed the city's Moscow Avenue, Bandera Avenue after the Russian invasion of eastern Ukraine. So yeah, Kiev City Council did that. So they keep on, the libs in this country, the so-called liberals, are very in favor of this Nazi collaborator guy. There are monuments to him throughout western Ukraine. The authorities in Lviv, just 46 miles from the Polish border, announced that 2019 would be the year of Stepan Bandera, again sparking protests from Israeli and Polish government. So, right after World War I, Poland and Ukraine had a war, which resulted in... So Poland captured Lviv, right, which is right here on the border. Close to the border. So Bandera studied there. He was a member of the OUN, the Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists, second in command of the militia group by 33. If only there was an anti-Lib coalition. Yeah, it's China and Russia. That's the anti-Lib coalition. The following year, Bandera orchestrated the assassination of the Polish Minister of Interior Bronislaw Piraki, and was sentenced to death by a Polish court. Later commuted to life imprisonment. When the Nazis invaded Poland, Bandera and other nationalists escaped from prison. Bandera was trained by the German Abwehr to do counter-espionage in the Soviet Union, occupied Poland and Ukraine, which he did until 1941. That year, Bandera and his followers signed a Declaration of Independence for Ukraine and announced an alliance with Germany. So yeah, Nazi collaborator. To their disappointment, Nazi Germany refused to recognize Ukraine's independence and ordered Bandera to withdraw the declaration. Even the Nazis rejected Ukraine. Ukraine are just the world's rejects, I swear. When he refused, he was arrested and later jailed in a concentration camp after trying to collaborate with them. But during his time in that concentration camp, his organization still carried out thousands of murders of Poles, most of them civilians, during a campaign of ethnic cleansing in Volhynia and later eastern Galicia. So as many as 100,000 people may have died during that 2-year campaign. He was openly against Jews and Poles having a place in a sovereign Ukrainian state. And during the Holocaust, 1/6 of the Jews murdered by the Nazis were from Ukraine. So he was probably in favor of that. But the Nazis turned on his group anyway, apparently. So they were at a crossroads, basically, being against both Nazi Germany and the Soviets by that time in the war. So since the Euromaidan revolution, Bandera has been a rallying cry for many Ukrainian nationalists, particularly after the Russian annexation of Crimea and the backing of separatist movements in Donbass. The main thing for the people following Bandera today is he fought for an independent Ukraine. They ignore that his organization cooperated with the Nazi regime, that they were anti-Semitic, and that Bandera was also anti-Polar, said some guy named Jakubin. Okay, I don't believe him, but... Because it's pretty obvious, like, after researching all of this, it's pretty clear that what Ukrainian nationalism means is neo-Nazism. Like, it's very clear to me. Like, that other article basically said it outright, that that's what it turned into. Or probably the essence of what it was the entire time. Because remember, we backed that coup. And who inspired Nazi Germany? United States of America. He said it. And what is really the significance of fascism? It's European supremacism. And war. That is the that is the essence of fascism. And what are we seeing now? We're seeing liberals backing both of those things in the framing, in the form of their support for Ukraine. It's a total political realignment and revelatory moment, unlike anything we've seen in the last 10 years. So So they had a march there to honor this guy in the Capitol. When is this from? This is from literally this year. This is from New Year's Day of this year. Hundreds of Ukrainians held a torchlight march in the capital, Kiev, to mark the birthday of the controversial nationalist leader Stepan Bandera. It came amid a buildup of Russian forces near the border with Ukraine, which some believe to be a prelude to... Yeah, well, they got that. Today, when there is a war with the occupier at the front and the struggle against the fifth column continues in the rear, we remember and honor the memory. So yeah, they're honoring this motherfucker. Never mind the fact that he was a Nazi collaborator, apparently. Never mind the fact that he was a severe anti-Semite and slaughtered a bunch of Jewish people and Polish people. Never mind all that stuff. He's revered as a hero there, but regarded as a traitor by others for leading an insurgent war against Soviet forces and collaborating with Nazi Germany. So there are still some based people there. Who say, no, fuck this guy. And as we already read, they were eventually rejected by the Nazis and had to fucking fight both the Soviets and the Nazis at the same time, which is like they got severely fucked from both ends in that way, and carried out murderous campaigns against Poles and Jews. Similar marches also took place in several other cities, including Lviv, where about 500 people gathered at his monument to honor him. Yeah. I don't have any unbanned requests, no. I think that guy gave up. Thankfully, he gave up. So they clearly have a fascism problem. I don't understand how you could even deny that at this point. The only way that you could, like, try to, like, is if you just got into the weeds in the most annoying way and, like, tried to say, like, oh, well, yeah, they honor a Nazi collaborator, but it's not because he was, like, all this kind of excuse making. And, like, oh, well, you know. I don't understand, like, I struggle to understand the counterposition here of my own. Like, it's just like a kind of copium, you know? So who are the Azov Battalion? Putin referenced the presence of such units within the Ukrainian military as one of his reasons for launching his special military operation to demilitarize and denazify Ukraine. Ukraine's National Guard tweeted a video showing Azov fighters coating their bullets in pig fat to be used allegedly against Muslim Chechens, allies of Russia deployed in their country. Azov has also been involved in training civilians through military exercises in the run-up to Russia's invasion. It's a far-right, all-volunteer infantry military unit whose members, estimated at, I think it is 900, are ultranationalists and accused of harboring neo-Nazi and white supremacist ideology. I don't know why they have to say accused when it's very open, like they actually fly Nazi flags and wear like Sonnenrands. The unit was initially formed as a volunteer group in 2014 out of the ultranationalist Patriot of Ukraine gang and the neo-Nazi Social National Assembly group. Both groups engaged in xenophobic and neo-Nazi ideals and physically assaulted migrants, the Roma community, and people opposing their views. As a battalion, the group fought on the front lines against pro-Russian separatists in Donetsk, the eastern region of Ukraine. Just before launching the invasion, Putin recognized, well, not anymore, because he recognized the independence of two rebel-held regions from Donbass, which was Donetsk and Lugansk republics. A few months after recapturing the strategic port city of Mariupol, it became like an Azov city. From the Russian-backed separatists, the unit was officially integrated into the National Guard of Ukraine on November 12, 2014, and exacted high praise from then-President Petro Poroshenko, who then later lost to Zelensky in 2019. He said, "These are our best warriors. Our best volunteers." Yeah, no kidding, bro. Of course he would say that, right? It's led by Andriy Beletsky, who's the leader of the previously mentioned neo-Nazi orgs. So they carry out attacks on minority groups. They fucking carry out attacks on Russians and people who wanted to separate and join Russia, Putin has now recognized them as like independent from Ukraine. Beletsky said in 2010, Ukraine's national purpose was to lead the white races of the world in a final crusade against Semite-led Untermenschen, which means inferior men. Belitsky was elected to parliament in 2014. So this guy was in their government. He left Azov as elected officials cannot be in the military or police force. He remained an MP until 2019. So the guy who founded it left it because you can't be in the government and the military at the same time. Which is weird because they both serve the same interest, but it's like, okay. He's nicknamed the White Ruler by his supporters. He established the far-right National Corps Party in October 2016, whose core base is veterans of Azov. So he made a whole new party also. So who funded them before becoming part of Ukraine's national military, National Guard? The unit received backing from Ukraine's interior minister in 2014, as the government had recognized its own military was too weak to fight off the pro-Russian separatists and relied on paramilitary volunteer forces. So yeah, Ukraine has always needed these neo-Nazis and fascists in their military. Like, they always have needed them. Even when they weren't officially in the military, they needed them. It's always been extremely significant. Like, the significance is right there geopolitically. It doesn't matter that there's only 900 of them. Why would you even think of counting the amount of discrete people who were explicitly neo-Nazis when their significance to the Ukrainian government is incredibly high regardless of the small amount of people relative to the greater population? Like, you understand that now? It's actually kind of really simple. These forces were privately funded as well. The most known oligarch being Igor Kolomoisky, who also funded other volunteer battalions such as the Dnipro 1 and Dnipro 2, Adar, and Donbass units. And I know Idar is also neo-Nazi, but I don't know about the other ones. Probably, I would assume. They also received early funding and assistance from the oligarch Sergei Taruta, the billionaire governor of Donetsk region. I'm assuming not anymore. The unit has denied it adheres to Nazi ideology as a whole, but Nazi symbols such as the swastika and SS regalia are rife on the uniforms and bodies of Azov members. Like, every uniform carries the Wolf's Angel symbol, which is a black swastika on a yellow background. And the national idea thing is back. So regardless of the fact that only a small amount of them actually openly claim to be Nazis, it's a Nazi group anyway. Individual members have professed to being neo-Nazis, and hardcore far-right ultranationalism is pervasive among members, obviously. So something happened in January 2018 where they rolled out their street patrol unit to quote-unquote restore order in the capital. But instead of doing that, they carried out pogroms which is like a mass killing, against the Roma community and attacked members of the LGBTQ community. So they said they were going to go restore order, and what they did was they went and slaughtered a bunch of minorities instead. So, someone from The Nation wrote in 2019 that Ukraine is the world's only nation to have a neo-Nazi formation in its armed forces. So it's very unique and significant. Like, it's very particular and determinate here. I don't understand how you can generalize or equivocate. They've been accused of violating international humanitarian law in 2016 by the UN Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights. It was about a period from November 2015 to February 2016 where they embedded their weapons and forces in used civilian buildings and displaced residents after looting civilian properties. The report also accused the battalion of raping and torturing detainees in the Donbass region, which I don't doubt for a second. And they're doing shit like that in the Russia conflict as well. You can see a clip here where they are holding civilians hostage inside a house. The Azov battalion, which is an official part of the Ukrainian military. And you have all these people. Look at all of those hostages, civilian hostages. Probably their own people as well. Probably Ukrainians. It says, once again, using civilians and civilian infrastructure as meat shields. And the libs claim that they're not doing this. They clearly are doing this. Another example. Ukrainian soldiers driving their tank up next to a kindergarten using children and children institutes as meat shields. So you can see that very clearly right there. Azov literally, like cowards, use human shields. Civilian human shields. Now, this is an old article, so it says, what has been the international response to Azov? Well, now the international response has been Russia trying to kick their asses, but... So that part kind of isn't relevant right now. Or maybe it is, because it says, the United States announced, and Canada, in 2015, announced that their own forces will not support or train the Azov regiment, citing its neo-Nazi connections. The following year, however, the U.S. lifted the ban under pressure from the Pentagon. So that is kind of relevant for us right now. We weren't going to support them, and then a year later we changed our mind. Because the Pentagon said no. But there isn't a deep state, folks. There's no deep state. Don't worry about it. And 40 Congress people in October 2019 signed a letter unsuccessfully calling for the U.S. State Department to designate Azov as a foreign terrorist organization, which didn't get through because it was against the overall interest of our imperialist military-industrial complex, clearly. Last April, Representative Alyssa Slotkin repeated the request, which included other white supremacist groups, to the Biden administration. It doesn't say... Wait, was that successful or not? Pressed by lawmaker. The State Department declined comment. It seems like they don't care. Yeah, it doesn't look like this one got through either. But this is interesting. The State Department Anyway, they admitted to designating, or they resorted to designating something called the Russian Imperial Movement and 3 of its leaders as specially designated global terrorists. So they'll do it in Russia, but not in Ukraine. That tells you a lot. They'll designate Russians as terrorists, but not Ukrainians. And this was before any of this shit even happened. This was last year. This recent stuff, I mean. And remember, the fucking Nazis that do exist in Russia are not literally part of the national military. They're not. But in Ukraine, they are. But for some reason, the State Department only cares about the Russian Nazis, even though they're not politically significant. So you have to take this kind of skeptical eye towards these things. The establishment must fall. And this is funny because in 2016, Facebook designated the Azov Regiment as a dangerous organization. However, later on, as soon as Russia launched its operation, Facebook reversed its ban, saying it would allow praise for Azov. Wow. Wow. Yeah, now libs act like they're not a problem. Exactly. It's very strange. Like, why would you even fucking want... Like... People are just in such a state of confusion. There's a clip where Deleuze says this. He's like, people are in a state of confusion. It's just, they're just totally bewildered. And it hits literally every time, as it rings accurate to this day, that people are just in this fucking total state of bewilderment. Where it's like, you don't know you're up from your down. Like, it's just crazy. As soon as there's a mainstream media narrative, people who just, like, lick their finger and put it up to the wind and see which direction it's blowing in, they just follow it uncritically. And it's like, I understand if you're, like, an emotional, like, empathetic person who just, like, cares about people, who it's like, oh, yeah, this shouldn't be happening to anyone. But it's like... Don't allow your empathy to get controlled by these people. It's that simple. Don't allow your empathy, your emotions to get controlled and siphoned by the fucking establishment. Because they don't give a shit. They're evil. They're perpetuating all of these evils. And Slavoj Žižek, in his book Violence, in the introduction at the end, he says, we have to learn, next time, every single time we're bombarded by the media with imagery of violence, it's our responsibility to step back and learn what causes the violence. And so, like, that is really the crucial position to take. Instead of just reacting with whatever you're being told on its face. It's very simple. I say that even though I know it's not. To me, it's kind of simple. But yeah, and there's a lot of lying. Like, there's just a lot of little lies that the media does. Like the bioweapons thing we talked about earlier. Although entire mainstream media was making a big deal out of the Snake Island 13, which here's a CNN article from a few weeks ago literally saying that they're actually alive, as was reported by the Ukrainian Navy. They surrendered to the Russians. They didn't die. Everyone was making a big deal because the guy said, go fuck yourself. They're like, oh, this hero, this Marvel Cinematic Universe hero. No, they surrendered. They thought they, like, oh, they died heroically. Like, there's that clip of Vosh saying that they died heroes. They didn't die. They're all alive still. They surrendered. It's very funny. Like, a statement from the country's Navy suggested this was certainly not the case. According to the Navy, the soldiers on the island repelled 2 attacks by Russian forces, but in the end were forced to surrender due to the lack of ammunition. So they ran out of ammo and had to give up. But for some reason, they all reported that they were killed at first. It's very weird. Very, very strange behavior on the part of the liberals. Nothing new. And you have the whole thing about the ghost of Kiev, which is literally a myth. It's actually not even a real guy. There is no ghost of Kiev. You have fucking that clown, Daniel Crenshaw, whatever his name is. That congressman with the eye patch that Hassan and Pete Davidson made fun of or whatever. He's like, oh yes, the ghost of Kiev. It's like, no, dude, there is no ghost of Kiev. We don't live in the Marvel Cinematic Universe where you have your good guys and bad guys and you have your, like, heroic, like, oh, we must defend the Anglo-American Empire from the Eurasian despots. It's like, no, sorry. The world doesn't work that way. Your fucking cartoon heroes aren't real. This is not where we live. It is weird, dude. They were alive the whole time, but they reported they died for no reason. What do you mean? How is it? What do you mean by who cares? It's relevant. They literally make shit up. They literally, you can't trust these fucking mainstream sources. That's my point. There's a lot of, like, this entire time has been very substantial. Now wrapping up, I'm just talking about a bunch of small shit. But still, it's relevant. Why is my chat so fucking stupid? Like, why are Twitch viewers such fucking boneheads? Like, I actually want to know the answer. But you have these sources, these liberal sources who say, oh, the ghost of Kiev may be a myth, but it's lethal as war morale. Oh. And you had that tweet of that guy who's like, the myth is more important than the truth because it boosts morale. And it's like, first of all, why would you need to boost morale with shit that's not even true if you were winning the war? Right? Also, what do you mean the truth doesn't matter? Are we really at that point? Are we actually at that point? Where they'll just tell you the truth doesn't... I thought these people were supposed to be the warriors of truth with all their fact-checking and misinfo, disinfo discourse. Anyone who contradicts what they say is suddenly, oh, you can't trust these people. Trust us, though. It's not like we ever lied to you. I thought these people were the warriors of truth, and now they're saying the truth is irrelevant. It's like they're admitting what they believed the whole time, you know? They're admitting that their truth is nothing more than a narrative. And the whole time, all they valued was the narrative, not the truth. It's very crazy. What do you mean? No, that. How would the ideology of nationalism make a country real? How is that anything I said at all? Like, you really are not following the plot. It would be a real country if it was an authentic political expression of a actual, like, demos of people. No, what the fuck is wrong with you anarchoids? Nationalism is not what makes a country real, bro. Like, how can an ideology make something real? Do you understand the problem with that? I don't think you understand the problem with that, do you? Like, you have the problem I explained in the beginning of the stream, where you privilege ideology over material reality. Yeah, you think they're all fake because you think you're above reality. That's why you think that. Because you don't like, you can't see it in front of you. Like, you don't live in the real world. You live in the idea world, where you can just negate everything by, like, formal logic and recognizing the contradictions in people's belief systems. Yes. So do you just reject all political economic analysis as not analysis of anything objective? If you don't believe in countries, like, what does that even mean? Where does that leave you? How are you going to analyze anything if you just say that there's no countries in material reality? Like, is it not an objective state of affairs that a country like there is a government called the United States of America, there's a government called Ukraine and Russia? Like, how is that not a real state of affairs? With borders and militaries enforced by power, with national interests, like, not even discussing the relationship between the demos and the nation even at this point. How do you ignore that reality? So you do believe in countries. Like, is that what you believe, or do you believe there's no countries? Because either way, like, you can't have both at once. I don't understand how the criteria can be whether or not you can fend off an invasion if you can fend off an invasion if you're not a country. Do you understand that? Like, if let's just hypothetically, if you say, like, a small group of fucking people on an island, like a undiscovered island, gets invaded by a fucking pirate ship and they fend off the pirate ship, does that make them a country now? According to you, it would. But that makes no sense. How is that a criteria for whether or not you're a country? He's not saying anything. Okay. Yeah, are you taking the L? Wait, but how can you think they're all fake if you think a country can fend off an invasion? What? If they are in any sense quote unquote real, you say, it's in that they come together for. What do you mean by come together? What do you mean?
Yeah, they all hold hands and repel the Russians. Yeah, so true. Whatever, bro. We're just on different wavelengths right now, not gonna lie.